In the forgotten shadows of ancient Greece, beyond marble temples and the songs of poets, lived a woman whose name would echo through eternity, Medusa. Her image has haunted the human imagination for thousands of years. To some, she is the monstrous gorgon with serpents for hair, a creature whose gaze could turn any living thing to cold, lifeless stone. To others, she is a tragic victim, a woman caught in the storms of divine power and punished for a crime she did not commit. But before her name became a curse, before her likeness struck fear into the hearts of men, she was something far different, a mortal priestess devoted to the service of Athena, the goddess of wisdom, courage, and war. Her beauty was not of the ordinary kind. Ancient poets spoke of her golden hair, which shone like threads of sunlight at dawn, and eyes as deep and clear as the Aegean Sea on a summer's day. Yet beauty alone did not define her. It was her devotion that made her stand apart. From morning until night, she moved with quiet grace through Athena's great temple, her hands sweeping marble floors worn smooth by centuries of prayer, her voice lifting hymns that seemed to rise like incense into the heavens. She was a living embodiment of piety, bound to a life of service, purity, and sacred duty. But beauty and devotion are not shields against the eyes of gods. In the world of Greek myth, mortals lived at the mercy of divine whims, and the gods themselves were not beyond jealousy, lust, and vengeance. It was in those fateful days that Poseidon, the mighty god of the seas, caught sight of Medusa. To a god whose realm stretched beyond the horizon, no mortal could ever truly be beyond his reach. Desire flared within him like a sudden storm, relentless and consuming, and he set his will upon possessing her. Medusa, bound by vows of chastity to Athena, resisted with every ounce of her strength. She fled through the towering columns of the Parthenon, the echoes of her sandals striking against the cool stone, her heart pounding as if it could break free from her chest. But the will of a god is not so easily defied. Within the sacred space meant for prayer and sacrifice, the sanctity of the temple was shattered by an act that would forever change the course of her life. When Athena, goddess of wisdom, beheld what had been done beneath her roof, her fury was swift. Yet in the strange and often cruel justice of the divine, it was not Poseidon who bore the punishment. Instead, Athena's wrath fell upon Medusa herself. Whether it was the goddess's pride that had been wounded, her temple desecrated, or some unspoken law of divine order that had been broken, she transformed the maiden she had once honored. In an instant, Medusa's golden hair writhed into a nest of living serpents, their scales shimmering with an unnatural sheen. Her gentle eyes, once a reflection of the sea, became weapons. One glance enough to rob a man of life, freezing him forever in cold, unyielding stone. From beauty came terror, and from innocence came exile. Cast out from all human lands, Medusa wandered until she reached a remote, jagged island at the edge of the known world. Here, where black cliffs rose like walls against the crashing waves, she made her home. The sea winds howled like the voices of the dead, and the air smelled of salt and stone. No mortal dared approach, for the rumors of her gaze had spread like wildfire through the cities and villages of Greece. Her only companions were her immortal sisters, Stheno and Euryale, fierce and ancient as the night itself, who kept vigil over her lonely existence. Years passed, but Medusa's name did not fade. If anything, her legend grew. Warriors whispered of her by firelight, boasting of the glory they would claim by taking her head. One by one they came, armed with swords and spears, each believing themselves strong enough to defeat the Gorgon. None returned. Her island became a place of bones and silent statues, a gallery of those who had underestimated her. Yet this was not the life she had chosen, nor the fate she had desired. Hers was a curse that forced her to destroy even those who might have shown her mercy. Then, as so often happens in the tales of gods and heroes, destiny sent another challenger, Perseus, the son of Zeus, favored by the gods. His mission was born not of personal hatred, but of a cruel command from a king who sought to send him to certain death. Yet Perseus was no ordinary man. Athena herself provided him with a polished bronze shield that could reflect an image without meeting the deadly gaze directly. Hermes gave him winged sandals to carry him swiftly through the air. Hades, lord of the underworld, lent him a helm of invisibility. And with a sword forged by Hephaestus, he set sail for the Gorgon's lair. On a moonless night, the hero arrived. The sea lay black and still beneath the stars as he crept into the shadowed caverns of Medusa's island. The hiss of serpents filled the air, mingling with the distant roar of waves. In the dim light, he saw her sleeping, her breathing deep and steady, the serpents shifting gently as if in dreams. For a fleeting moment, he hesitated. Through the mirror of the shield, she did not seem a monster, but a woman, cursed, exiled, and alone. Yet the mission allowed no room for mercy. With practiced precision, Perseus approached, never meeting her eyes. The sword flashed once in the dark, and the silence of the night was broken by a scream so powerful it seemed to shake the earth itself. From her severed neck sprang Pegasus, the winged horse, and Chrysor, the golden warrior, children of her union with the god of the sea, born in the instant of her death. Perseus placed her head into a leather bag, its power still intact, for even in death, the gaze of the Gorgon could turn the living to stone. From that day forward, Medusa's head became a weapon in the hands of the hero. Enemies who dared stand against him were turned to statues with a single glance. In time, Perseus returned it to Athena, who placed the image of the Gorgon upon her shield, the Aegis, so that Medusa's power would forever serve the goddess who had cursed her. And thus, in a cruel twist of fate, the very divinity that had destroyed her now wielded her likeness as a symbol of fear and protection. Yet the story of Medusa does not end with her death. Across centuries, her image has appeared in sculpture, in mosaic, in painted pottery. To the Greeks, she was a warning, a reminder that even the most beautiful can be dangerous, and that to look too closely at what you fear may be your undoing. To others, she became a symbol of rage, of vengeance, of feminine power born from injustice. Even now, her story stirs debate. Was she truly a villain? Or was she the ultimate victim of divine cruelty, her humanity stripped away by the very gods she served? And so her legend continues, carried from one generation to the next, reshaped by each telling, whispered in the dark halls of museums, invoked in art and literature, debated by scholars and storytellers. Somewhere in the space between monster and martyr, between beauty and horror, stands Medusa, her gaze unbroken by time, still meeting ours across the gulf of millennia. And perhaps, just perhaps, her true story is still waiting to be told. But to truly understand Medusa's place in the ancient world, we must look far beyond the shores of Greece. The Greeks were great borrowers of stories, taking fragments from the older civilizations around them and weaving them into their own myths. In the windswept deserts of Mesopotamia, long before Athens built her first walls, there were carvings of female figures with serpent-like bodies, guarding the gates of temples. In Egypt, the cobra, the uraeus, was a sacred emblem of divine authority, worn upon the brow of pharaohs to strike fear into their enemies. Could Medusa's crown of serpents be the Greek echo of these far older symbols of protection and destruction? In some ancient coins from the city of Neapolis, Medusa's face appears not as a monster, but as a serene and almost regal woman, her hair a halo of snakes, her expression calm, yet unyielding. Such images suggest that in certain places, she may not have been viewed purely as a horror, but as a guardian, one whose terrible power could protect the righteous and repel invaders. Even the placement of her image on shields, doorways, and armor hints at this dual role. To the friend, she was a protector. To the enemy, she was death. The Greeks themselves were divided in their view of her. In Hesiod's Theogony, Medusa is the only mortal among her Gorgon sisters, doomed to die, yet given a place of strange honor in the genealogy of gods and monsters. In later works, her tragedy is softened, and whispers emerge of her life before the curse, a life that may have been filled with worship, prophecy, and even healing. Could it be that the earliest version of Medusa was not a villain, but a priestess whose power grew too great, threatening the hierarchy of the gods? In the politics of Olympus, such a woman could not be allowed to stand unchallenged. And yet, the curse Athena placed upon her was unlike most divine punishments. It was not merely a stripping away of beauty or the infliction of pain. It was a transformation so profound that it altered her place in the world forever. She was no longer merely human, nor entirely divine, but something in between, a liminal being who could not belong to either realm. In this way, Medusa's fate mirrors that of other boundary crossers in myth, figures like Chiron, the wise centaur who was both man and beast, or the Titan Prometheus, who loved humanity enough to defy the gods. All paid dearly for standing at the threshold between worlds. Traveling further into the Mediterranean, we find echoes of Medusa in the Etruscan and Roman worlds. Roman mosaics sometimes depict her with wings, emphasizing her swiftness and supernatural nature. In other cases, she appears in funerary art, staring out from sarcophagi, as if daring the living to defile the resting place of the dead. Here, she becomes a psychopomp, a guide and guardian of the threshold between life and death. The snakes that crown her head take on a symbolic weight. In many ancient traditions, serpents represented rebirth, immortality, and the endless cycle of life, death, and return. Could it be that even in her most feared form, Medusa carried within her the promise of transformation? There are other, darker interpretations. Some scholars suggest that the myth of Perseus and Medusa hides within it the memory of an ancient cultural conquest, a time when patriarchal warrior tribes swept into the Aegean and supplanted the older goddess-centered religions of the land. In this telling, Medusa was not a literal monster, but the symbol of a powerful female deity whose temples and priestesses were destroyed or absorbed into the new male-dominated order. The act of beheading becomes not merely a feat of heroism, but an act of religious overthrow, the slaying of the old ways to make room for the new. If this is true, then Athena's role in the story becomes even more complex. Once perhaps the leader of such goddess cults herself, she now appears in Greek myth as a supporter of the male heroes, a divine figure who grants Perseus the very tools needed to destroy another woman of power. The image of Medusa's head on Athena's shield, then, could be seen as the ultimate sign of dominance, the conquered power now bound into the service of the conqueror. But myths have a way of resisting the intentions of those who shape them. Over time, Medusa's image began to take on a life of its own, slipping free from the control of any single narrative. Artists in the Hellenistic and Roman periods began to portray her with a strange beauty, her features both alluring and terrible, the snakes curling like living jewelry around her face. In these depictions, she is not simply a beast to be slain, but a mystery to be solved, a figure who compels the viewer to look closer, even when they know the danger of meeting her gaze. And what of the gaze itself? Some psychologists have argued that Medusa's power lies not in literal petrification, but in the primal human fear of being seen, truly seen, for what we are. In her eyes, there is no hiding, no deception. She does not merely kill with her look. She strips away all masks, leaving the soul naked and defenseless. Perhaps this is why even Perseus, the triumphant hero, never dared meet her eyes directly. The mirror of his shield was not just a clever trick. It was a shield against truth itself. Yet her gaze could also be read as a kind of liberation. Those she turned to stone were freed from the chaos and corruption of the mortal world, frozen in a perfect, unchanging moment. In this light, Medusa becomes not a bringer of death, but a preserver, a strange kind of savior who rescues her victims from the slow decay of life. It is a disturbing idea, yet one that fits with the dual nature of her myth, both destroyer and protector, both monster and martyr. The deeper we dig, the more we find that Medusa is not a single story, but a mirror in which each age has seen what it most feared and what it most desired. To the ancient Greeks, she was a test of heroism. To the Romans, a guardian spirit. To the early Christians, a pagan emblem to be reinterpreted or destroyed. To the Renaissance artists, a study in the extremes of beauty and horror. And to us today, she may be something else entirely. A symbol of resilience, of the dangerous power that comes from being wronged, of the unbroken will beneath the weight of a curse. But there is another lens through which we can see Medusa's story, the psychological one. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist, often spoke of this shadow, the hidden, repressed parts of ourselves that we fear to confront. In many ways, Medusa is the embodiment of this shadow. She is everything society teaches us to fear: female rage, untamed power, unfiltered truth. When Perseus confronts her, he does not look directly. Instead, he uses a reflection. Perhaps this is more than a battle tactic. Perhaps it is a metaphor for how we approach our own darkest truths, indirectly, cautiously, never face to face. In this reading, Medusa becomes not just a mythic villain, but a psychological trial, a terror we must pass through to claim our own strength. Her petrifying gaze could be seen as the paralyzing fear that grips us when we encounter something within ourselves we do not understand or wish to accept. Just as Perseus must confront her to gain the weapon that will later save his mother, so too must we face our inner Medusa to unlock the gifts hidden behind our fears. Stepping away from the realm of psychology, let's return to the archaeological record. Across the Aegean, fragments of terracotta masks bearing the Gorgon face have been found in temple ruins, some dating back to the 7th century BCE. Their wide eyes and protruding tongues seem designed to shock, to repel evil, to keep sacred spaces pure. What is fascinating is that these masks were often positioned above doorways, the threshold between the safe interior and the chaotic world outside. This placement reinforces the idea of Medusa as a liminal figure, forever guarding the boundary between worlds. Further afield, in the ruins of ancient Anatolia, inscriptions speak of snake women who held knowledge of the underworld. In some cases, they are tied to water, sacred springs, hidden wells, rivers that vanish underground. Water, in ancient thought, often represented the boundary to the other side, a passage to the realm of spirits. Could Medusa's original myth have tied her to such places? If so, her beheading might symbolize the severing of humanity's connection to certain mysteries once known to our ancestors. Interestingly, snakes themselves were rarely seen as purely evil in the ancient world. In Minoan Crete, priestesses are depicted holding serpents aloft in each hand, a sign of their mastery over life and death. In Vedic India, the Naga serpent beings are both feared and revered as keepers of wisdom. Even in the Hebrew Bible, the bronze serpent raised by Moses in the wilderness becomes a symbol of healing, not destruction. If Medusa's crown of snakes is a corruption of an older symbol, then perhaps her myth records not the rise of evil, but the fall of something sacred. And then there's the role of the gods in her story. Poseidon, the god of the sea, is often cast as the villain who violated her in Athena's temple, triggering the curse. But in other traditions, Poseidon is the giver of gifts, the father of heroes. Why would the Greeks allow such a stain on his character? Some believe that this contradiction hints at an even older layer of the myth, one in which Medusa was not a helpless victim, but a willing consort of a sea god, perhaps even a sea goddess herself. Over time, as patriarchal values reshaped the story, her agency was stripped away and her power redefined as monstrous. Her death, too, is full of curious details. When Perseus beheads her, two beings spring from her neck: Pegasus, the winged horse, and Chrysaor, a warrior with a golden sword. This is no ordinary death. It's a birth, a creation event. The spilling of her blood produces life, not just destruction. Here again, the myth hints that Medusa was more than a monster. She was a source of power, fertility, and even beauty, whose severed head continued to wield influence from beyond the grave. In later legends, drops of her blood are said to have both deadly and healing properties, depending on how they are used. From her right side came a venom that could kill instantly. From her left, a balm that could restore life. This duality is striking. It makes her power not inherently evil, but dependent on the will of the one who wields it. Such a theme resonates deeply in myth, where the same force can be both blessing and curse, creation and destruction, depending on the heart of the user. Roman poets such as Ovid added layers of tragedy to her story, painting her not as a born monster, but as a wronged woman punished for another's crime. This version struck a chord in later centuries, inspiring countless reinterpretations. In Renaissance art, Medusa's severed head is often depicted with an expression not of rage, but of sorrow, as if in the moment of death, she became once again the beautiful maiden she had been before Athena's curse. The snakes remain, but they coil loosely, almost protectively, around her face. In the medieval period, her image took on new meaning in Christian art. The Gorgon face appeared in manuscripts as a symbol of sin's ugliness or the devil's power to freeze the soul. But even then, there was an undercurrent of fascination, the recognition that Medusa's beauty and terror were inseparably bound, that the very thing which made her dangerous was also what made her unforgettable. As we move into the modern era, Medusa refuses to fade into obscurity. She appears in literature, film, and even fashion, often reimagined as a misunderstood anti-hero. In feminist interpretations, she becomes a symbol of resistance against oppression, a woman transformed by trauma into something the world cannot look at without trembling. Her gaze becomes not a weapon of arbitrary cruelty, but a shield against those who would harm her again. Yet for all these interpretations, one thing remains constant. Her power is never diminished. Whether she is feared or revered, pitied or admired, Medusa endures as a force that cannot be fully tamed. She slips between categories: goddess, monster, victim, hero, defying every attempt to pin her down. Perhaps that is why she still haunts our imagination, because she refuses to be one thing, and in that refusal, she holds a mirror to our own complexity. From the temple walls of ancient Greece to the inked pages of medieval manuscripts, from the whispered myths of Anatolia to the sacred texts of the Hebrews, Medusa's shadow has never truly faded. She is the face carved into stone to ward off evil, the whispered warning in the night, the guardian at the threshold of worlds. We have seen her as the victim of divine injustice, the embodiment of primal chaos, the misunderstood keeper of a power too great for mortal hands. Her story carries echoes of the serpent in Eden, of the sea-born monsters that haunt every coastline, of the warrior queens and priestesses whose legacies were rewritten by the victors. She is at once singular and universal, a figure who transcends her own myth to stand beside every legend of beauty turned deadly, of power bound in exile, of voices silenced only to grow louder across the centuries. When we look at Medusa, we are not just gazing at a relic of the ancient world. We are looking into a mirror, one that reflects the fears, desires, and contradictions of every age. She is a monster and a muse, a curse and a blessing, a symbol of danger and a promise of transformation. And perhaps that is why her eyes, though carved in stone or painted on canvas, still seem to follow us. For in the end, Medusa's myth is not merely about the gods or the heroes who claim to defeat her. It is about us, about what we fear to face, about the boundaries we dare to cross, and about the truths we can only glimpse when we are brave enough to stare into the darkness and not look away.